This is a press briefing by U.S. Attorney General John Ashcroft, and this is being held a week after the naming and showing the pictures of the 9/11 hijackers for the first time to the public, and 3 weeks after the attacks itself. Let's see what he has to say.
Assistance to the United States of America in relation to the tragedy of September the 11th this year, the attacks by terrorists on the World Trade Center, on the Pentagon, and of course on the flight which ended so tragically in Pennsylvania. Our relationship with Canada is one of the most satisfying relationships that could be anticipated between two nations. And the commerce which flows so freely between our countries is the basis for a substantial part of our success and our prosperity. And it's very important that we have the kind of continuing relationship and the kind of openness between our cultures and the kind of capacity for commerce and individuals to flow back and forth across our borders that sustains our relationship. The assistance on September the 11th and since then by our Canadian neighbors has been remarkable. The attack on September 11th was not just an attack on the United States. It happened to have been an attack on every civilization that values freedom. I'm personally deeply saddened by the 23 Canadian victims still unaccounted for in the World Trade Center attack. And I want to express publicly my condolences to the Solicitor General of Canada and the citizens of Canada for their loss in this setting. As President Bush expressed his gratitude to Prime Minister Chrétien during their meeting on September the 24th of this year, let me reemphasize again the urgent need to implement strong and sometimes difficult measures to combat terrorism.
I just want to stop right here because I do want to talk about something that's often overlooked, even when it comes to the experts on 9/11, is that the northern border, everyone talks about the southern border, rightfully so. The majority of our illegal immigration comes from the south. But when it comes to Islamic fundamentalism, they usually tend to use the northern border because of the nexus between British Columbia and, say, the upper northeast. And in this case, when you have the areas that were 9/11 affiliated regarding the terrorists, you had Boston, you had New Hampshire, you had New York, New Jersey. And remember about the Millennium Plot. This was stopped in British Columbia. The border guard, Diana, I forgot her last name, happened to just look at the individual, Ahmed Wassam, and noticed something was off about him because he seemed very nervous. And when he opened up the trunk of his car on the ferry boat after being extradited off the ferry, they found, explosives in the wheel of the spare tire. And that's how they caught Bassam, tried to get away, but he got caught. But the northern border is the nexus between the Middle East, Canada, inside North America. Because the concentration of immigration, especially when it comes to the spotlight, the international and domestic agencies are always focusing on the border between Mexico and Texas. The free flowing of drugs, not to, forgetting about, the terrorist corridor between British Columbia and the United States. And also to go even further back, Millennium Plot and 9/11 is the 93 World Trade Center bombing and the 98 East Africa bombings and an individual named Ali Muhammad, who people tend to forget. Muhammad and an associate were caught at the border in Canada trying to get inside the United States. And the Canadians looked at the passport of Ali Muhammad. They called the FBI agent and he said, let him through because he was a triple spy for the CIA, the FBI, and terrorist organizations such as the ones like Al Qaeda. and being affiliated with Omar Abdel Rahman and Gamma Islamiyah, an Egyptian organization, a terrorist organization. So I just wanted to bring that up because, Canada is a major player in the 9/11 attacks because they were victimized by the attacks, and as well as the corridor between how the terrorists got in the country free flowing. Because there's a lot of affiliates in Canada. Remember, Mohammed Atta and Abdulaziz Al Amari, the two 9/11 hijackers aboard American Airlines Flight 11. Remember where they went? They went to Portland, Maine, and almost missed their connecting flight. They went up to Portland, Maine on September 10th and stood in a hotel room. Why'd they go up there? So basically, the 9/11 Commission basically said, because they didn't want to attract attention at Logan Airport, which is nonsense. I happen to think that they were meeting contacts up there. Remember, it's coming out now that there have been more planes that were going to be involved with the 9/11 attacks. More operatives involved. The original plan for 9/11 was 10 planes, according to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, if we believe the story. And then it was shortened to 4 planes. But the original plan was 10 planes. I happen to think there were more than 4 planes regarding 9/11. And they just couldn't get off the ground because of the stand-down order by Norman Mineta. But first, the stand-down order by Ben Shipley, the acting, the associate director of United Airlines. Ben Sliney, a hero. No one ever talks about him.
Vital assistance that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are providing to the United States investigators. It builds on a foundation of excellent law enforcement cooperation, something both authorities depend upon in the ordinary course of our relationships. In previous cases, Canada's assistance in our investigation of terrorist activity, especially the matter that was planned to coincide with the Millennium's celebrations in the United States, that was facilitated by our relationship, and which made easier the work of prosecutors from Seattle and New York in convicting Ahmed Rassam, known to have been affiliated with Osama bin Laden and other individuals. That all took place earlier this year and was a result of our
Ahmed Rassam was a member of Al-Qaeda and was training at Al-Farouk, which is a training camp in Afghanistan. He was seen there with Zacharias Moussaoui, the alleged 20th hijack.
Cooperation. In these extraordinary circumstances, all countries must implement measures aimed at dismantling terrorist organizations and preventing further and future attacks. And I'm just delighted to have this opportunity to express personally the gratitude of the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Immigration Naturalization Service, other agencies regarding and in participating in law enforcement in the United States, to express personally to the Solicitor General of Canada our profound appreciation for their many acts of cooperation and for their participation in an investigation which has been self-initiated in many respects. Sometimes before we could ask, they were already cooperating to do those things they knew to be necessary in order for us to succeed. With that in mind, I'm very pleased to introduce to you the Solicitor General of Canada, Lawrence McCauley, and ask him if he cares to make any remarks. Friend, thank you.
Thank you very much, John. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Ashcroft for his leadership through these very difficult times. As the Prime Minister indicated, we will stand shoulder to shoulder with you and support you in these difficult times. We discussed the investigation, and I was pleased that Mr. Ashcroft and the FBI couldn't express enough of a pleasure in how the support they have with CSIS and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and how important it is for the security of both nations. We also discussed legislation and what we plan to do in our country. There's passed a resolution in our country today that freezes assets connected with terrorism. Now that just extends the list, and that will be also published. We also discussed the Canadian border, the Canadian-American border, and I was so pleased that Mr. Ashcroft indicated and is also concerned about the free flow of goods and to make sure that the economies of both countries do not suffer, and in fact, more or less do what the terrorists intended to do, and that was hurt democracy. Again, I want to thank you. It's a pleasure.
It's funny that Macaulay says this because it was the Canadian and U.S. Signals Intelligence Agencies, the NSA and I think the Canadian Intelligence Agency. Fuck, I forgot the name of the. I'm going to cheat. Yeah, I forgot the name. The C something. The CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Services, right? They worked alongside with the NSA in regards to breaking down the walls, so to speak, of protecting civilians' privacy rights, because this was best for everybody to keep everybody safe. We have to break the law in order to preserve our law, right? The law and the law. What law is that? Law and order, right? So, but what was absconded? What was absolved? Privacy. The key thing, right? We got to know what people are thinking before they even act on it. And if you're just some regular citizen, what do you got to worry about? Well, this leads to a bigger problem, an authoritarian and totalitarian state, right? That's where we're headed. And 9/11 was just a pretext for all this. So it's interesting Macaulay says this at behest because they were already working with the NSA on the illegal wiretaps of everyday citizens. It wasn't the terrorists that did this. It was the domestic governments, the respective governments of Canada and the United States that absolved the rights of everyday citizens. Terrorists didn't do that. You did. And that's why I consider the the Canadian and American governments terrorist. They're terrorists by their own definition because they are the ones who define what terrorism is. Well, according to their own definition, they are terrorists themselves, engaging in violence to achieve a geopolitical goal. The United States is currently doing this, whether they do it directly or indirectly. The Patriot Act, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2002, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2003. The signals operational covert operations headed by the NSA regarding Verizon, AT&T, collecting data on their citizens without warrant. Breaking FISA rules, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. All these were broken, and much more, regarding domestic policies protected by who? The American government, and used 9/11 as a pretext, saying now we have to protect the citizens by any means necessary, even if we have to break the law.
To be here with you, John, and to have you leading this investigation and making sure that the people who are responsible are brought to justice and democracy and the way that you and I and all.
If that was the case, you wouldn't have waited 24 years? And still you protect the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Still, you do not bring up the Israeli foreign intelligence operations between the years 2000 and 2001 and what intelligence they collected while spying on the United States government, its intelligence agencies, and living in close by to all of the 19 hijackers. Not a coincidence. Not by any means necessary. Not anymore.
All Canadians and Americans and people who live in the free world live and wish to continue to live and will live that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir.
Attorney General Ashcroft.
Mr. Attorney General, you said last week that the northern border has become a transit point, quote, for several individuals involved in terrorism. Has there been any evidence at all linking September 11 to terrorists who might have come across the Canadian border?
First of all, let me say that the 4,000 miles or so of border between the United States and Canada are a model for the way neighbors ought to conduct themselves. I mean, it is a very substantial open border between two nations, friendship of which couldn't be stronger in my judgment. But anytime there are borders that are that open and that substantial, there are risks that people crossing the border could be individuals who are involved in very serious activities that could be troublesome. Without commenting on this investigation, let me just refer to you to one where the conviction has already been obtained. The Rassam bombing was a situation where, with the help of Canadian authorities, we apprehended him transporting significant explosives into this country.
True.
And those were for purposes of disrupting the Millennium celebration. So that cooperation is important. The border is important. But obviously there is an exposure and a potential for problems there, and that's what working together will help us curtail. Thank you.
Just to add on that too, I am, not at all progressive when it comes to immigration. I think we should have now at this time, currently, more than ever now, I think we should have stricter, stronger security measures, including a border wall. Because of the simple fact that the U.S. government has made so many enemies over the years after 9/11 that we are basically target number one. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we can't go back on this. Specifically now, currently, we are at best laying down in regards to defense, because at no point that I remember, and I'm 55, I'll be 56 this year, have I ever seen our country so disenfranchised, so discombobulated, so morally broken, so spiritually disenfranchised, so sectarian, so just divided upon ideological through ideology, that we are ripe, we're insecure to fend off a major terrorist attack. And Ashcroft in the year 2001, never forget, rejected any report, especially in late 2001, summer of 2001, rejected any reports, any threat matrix reports, any cables regarding Al-Qaeda and a threat to the United States, inside the United States. He didn't want to hear about it. Even though, even in the administration before him, the Clinton administration, who sent the National Security Advisor Sandy Berger, the intelligence was pouring in. We're talking about 1996 here. And the CIA went to war against bin Laden in 99. This wasn't just some conspiracy about bin Laden. The threat was there. There's enough intelligence there. But our security in this country is abysmal. And you wouldn't think so with all the extrajudicial massacres that the United States has been involved in, especially toward Yemen and Gaza, which is enough to have the frenzy and the ire of Islamic fundamentalist groups.
The United States has shared some evidence with our allies about how the terrorism attacks are connected to Osama bin Laden. What can you tell us about what that evidence is?
Well, obviously, our investigation is ongoing, and it's not my position at this time to detail the evidence that's available. Let me just indicate to you that from very early stages in the investigation, we saw Osama bin Laden, the Al-Qaeda network, which is a network that is a substantial group of individuals as well as organizations, as being a focal point of the of those responsible for this act of terror. Yes, sir.
Ashcroft, do you think one
Now,
of the solutions?
again, need I remind you that Ashcroft didn't give two shits about Al-Qaeda and bin Laden in the summer of 2001? Didn't want to hear it, not from the National Counterterrorism Center, not from the NCTC, not from the FBI, Department of Justice, not from the Office of National Intelligence, not from anybody. Okay? Not even, and didn't care for them in principals meetings. All right? And at the same time, remember that wanted post by bin Laden, which, they didn't say anything about 9/11? Well, what John Ashcroft said is right, that the investigation was ongoing and they were still collecting evidence against bin Laden for his role in the 9/11 attacks. But because bin Laden escaped to Pakistan and because the CIA tortured those allegedly involved with the 9/11 attacks, we couldn't charge anybody for 9/11. And so the map was never updated. Even bin Laden was killed in 2011, May 1st, 2011. He gets killed, and it doesn't matter. And even if there was a trial, which there can never be a trial, I wonder what evidence would be against bin Laden. I believe he had some part in it, but it wasn't his plan. That was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, allegedly.
To the
I say allegedly because nobody's charged.
potential for trouble between Canada and the U.S.
Nobody's
in terms
found
of
guilty.
crossing the border and the vulnerability there. Is a security perimeter around North America, is that something you favor?
Well, I believe that we can work together to improve the right kind of access on our border. It's in Canada's interest that they have an awareness of who's crossing the border from the United States to Canada. It's in our interest to have an awareness and a cooperative endeavor for us to know who's both leaving the United States and coming into the United States. These mutual interests will provide, I believe, the basis for our continuing cooperation, and it may be that we'll adjust the way in which that cooperation is achieved as a result of what happened on the 11th of September. But I believe that we'll continue to cooperate, and I think that it will facilitate our capacity to prosper in both settings.
Several of our allies.
You had a number of individuals that were connected to the 9/11 attacks that went through Afghanistan and Pakistan, through Afghanistan to Europe, okay, through Saudi Arabia to Europe, specifically Italy, Switzerland, France, Germany. And you had a number of individuals that were connected to Al-Qaeda going through this corridor to get all the way to Canada, and through Canada and also through Florida. You had a pincer, like a pincer attack, coming from the south and the north. So this is why 9/11 attacks were so successful. And you wonder if, the borders really didn't get much in the way of any more secure than they were 24 years ago. And if you look at the federal database regarding border immigration in the last 4 years, you can see a number of individuals that are coming in through the northern and southern border. And through the second Trump, to the end of the Biden administration to the beginning of the second Trump administration, you had a number of individuals that were coming in that have far exceeded the last 5 years. So it's really concerning.
Have received what they call conclusive proof that Osama bin Laden is connected to the September 11th attacks. This information has gone to other countries. Can you share it with the American people now?
I'm not prepared to share the evidentiary basis for regarding parties responsible for these tragedies at this time. Yes, sir.
Mr. Ashcroft, as you know, there was a good deal of discussion since Sunday about your comments on a couple.
I see he can't is because if he has evidence, he has to use it in the court of law, or else the defense will know what fucking evidence he has, so he can get his client on. You know, that goes for any case. Not going to show evidence to the public.
Of television shows, and
You're not
whether
having-
you meant to say that another terrorist attack in this country is likely as opposed to merely possible. Could you clarify or amplify on that for us today, sir? And if I may also ask Mr. McCauley if there are any steps that the Canadian government is planning to take to tighten up on immigration into your countries.
Well, let me just indicate that I believe that additional terrorist acts are possible. And I believe the kind of attack which we endured shows that the risks of such possibilities are substantial and that we should be very much aware of those risks. I don't think the United States should retreat or should withdraw. There shouldn't be a cultural paralysis which otherwise curtails our activities. The President's clearly stated that he thinks we should have a heightened awareness, and we've called upon Americans for their assistance in this heightened awareness. And I think the right balance in understanding that is what's important for us. We're not going to cease to be the free, open society that offers opportunity to Americans that we've been, but we're going to be careful. And I've asked the Congress very clearly for additional tools to reduce the risk of further incidents. And I believe it is time for us to understand that tools can reduce the risk of terrorism, talk won't. And we need to make sure that we curtail the risks of terrorist activities. Let me just finally say that terrorism won't happen based on what we decided the risk factors are. On September the 10th, we didn't have an understanding of how high the risk factors were. We need.
That's a fucking lie, because you already knew. You knew this back in '96. Like I said, the CIA set up its own station for one individual. It's never done this before because they knew the threat that bin Laden posed. Scheuer, give him credit here. He knew that bin Laden was a credible threat to the national security of the United States. He knew Al Qaeda was a serious threat. You didn't. When you took your position as Attorney General, you saw Russia, you saw China as the threat. You didn't see the United States as the Al Qaeda as the threat. And the threat exists because it's a response to what the United States government was doing to the Muslim world. Remember, you bombed Iraq in '90. You went through the oil for food program, the sanctions that killed 500,000 people, mainly old women and children. You allow for the nationalists under Slobodan Milosevic to slaughter Muslims wholesale in Bosnia-Herzegovina. The Croatian armies that created some of the worst mass killings I've ever seen anywhere in human history. Dealing with Israel and ignoring the plight of the Palestinian people in Gaza, all of this, which could be seen as a slight to the Islamic world. But not everybody, most Muslims are not terrorists. They're decent people. And they just want to live alongside each other, with everybody else, freely engaging in the religion of their own choosing, without interference by government. That's the great thing about the Constitution of the United States of America. The First Amendment protects the citizenry from the government and interfering on what religion they could practice. And I'm an atheist, so I support this wholeheartedly. But the way things are going now, it just seems that the First Amendment is going to be an afterthought.
To be prepared. We need to understand that there is a possibility of additional activity and act accordingly, but not surrender the freedom that we have. And I know you addressed a question to
you were doing it at the time
yes,
in
in Canada,
2001.
in the House of or in the Senate of Canada, we have
So did
an
you.
immigration bill, C11, that
Canada.
will tighten up our immigration rules. For
Stone
an
Pile
example,
did.
anybody coming into the country, there'll be advance information on who they are and what they're about, and there's the possibility of an identification card. And John is absolutely right. Interception with our intelligence agencies. We've made a commitment that we're going to beef up that area, more funds for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and to make sure also that our cooperation, seamless cooperation with Mr. Ashcroft's responsibilities with FBI and other agencies in this country continue, so that that we provide as safe a society as possible.
You know, also too, the NSA and the CIA made billions after 9/11 because it expanded their annual budget. You know, what do we need to make people safe? That's what Bush went. Bush went to the director of the NSA, Michael Hayden, at the time. What do you want me to do for you? He went to the DCI, George Tenet. What can I do for you? He went to Robert Mueller, the director of the FBI. What can I do for you? Expanded their budgets, all three of them. Canada went the CSIS. You know, the United Kingdom, Australia, the Five Eyes community, which is the intelligence, signals intelligence community, Five Eyes, that basically expanded. Now it's like fucking, 25 eyes. Everybody's working in conjunction with one another to share data on each other freely, without warrant, without walls, without hesitation. This is what the governments did. The Islamists didn't do this.
Ashcroft shared this evidence with you or with other ministers of the Canadian government, and based on what you may have seen and heard, are you convinced beyond any doubt that bin Laden and Al-Qaeda are behind these attacks?
Are you asking me to indicate to you what information the Attorney General of the United States has given to me about one of the largest investigations ever?
No, sir.
Yeah,
No.
right. Dumb question.
You've seen,
I have a report here.
based on the evidence you've seen, whether you are convinced that bin Laden and Al-Qaeda are behind these attacks.
Well, it was certainly of my strong belief that that is what the situation is.
Mr. Ashcroft, we were talking
Doesn't know it.
Discussion about asking for
Can I go to you next?
when you were
Next.
talking about how you didn't really even have a good enough grasp on September 10th of how high the risk factor was, can you say if you now believe it's possible that the government dropped the ball with regard to Mr. Moussaoui, the man being held in Minneapolis, when...
I think we'll have plenty of time to review things in the future. We're intent on developing a capacity to prevent further injury to the United States of America through terrorist attacks, and that's what we're focused on now. That's why I've been so intent on two things: developing an understanding of exactly what happened and trying to move legislation so that additional tools that are available in much of the area of criminal law would be available also in terrorism. And now to you, gentlemen, thank you for your...
Oh, you know what? You're such a slippery cocksucker. Here, let me fill you in, ladies and gentlemen, on that question raised by the reporter. Yes, they dropped the ball, right? Specifically, the Federal Bureau of Investigation here. All right, you have some agents in Minneapolis that caught two individuals, Hussein Al-Attas and Zacharias Moussaoui, who were staying at a hotel. And, Zacharias Moussaoui, before that, had sent emails to an air school in Minneapolis when he was in Oklahoma, and asking a whole bunch of weird questions. You know, didn't care about landing the plane. Cared about just flying the plane. Where was the oxygen tanks? How to cut them off? Blah blah. All this. You know, a whole lot of really peculiar, specifically peculiar questioning. So they went to the FBI. And the FBI went to an agent named Harry Salmon to investigate the matter. And they were staying at the hotel. And there was two individuals found in the hotel, Hussein Al-Attas and Zacharias Moussaoui. And Harry Salmon was with someone from INS and another FBI agent. They separated the men. Hussein Al-Attas said that Zacharias Moussaoui was an Islamist. And he hated the United States. And he had a last will and testament on him, on his person. Armed with this, considering that both Zacharias Moussaoui and Hussein Al-Attas are not American citizens, the FBI has to get what is a FISA warrant, a foreign intelligence surveillance warrant, where they has to go to the country of origin and ask, all right, is this guy a danger? Is he really an Islamist? So when French intelligence went, sent back information to Minneapolis FBI, they showed that he was connected to an individual named Abu Hamza, who was a radical cleric who's currently doing life here in the United States for promoting and facilitating terrorism and threats to national security of the United States of America. And they found out that this guy, Zacharias Moussaoui, has a history of being with French jihadists. Right there was enough to get a criminal warrant under the FISA Protection Act. No, the definitions are wrong, said the radical fundamentalist unit at Minneapolis. In fact, Dave Frasca and I think Bob Bowman basically argued with Harry Salmon about the legal definition, the legalese, the wording involved with the warrant. And all this took time. Then on September 11, 2001, the attacks happened. Guess what? They had the approval to basically look at Zacharias Moussaoui's belongings. But then it was fucking too late, wasn't it? It's always too late. It's always fucking too late. So yes, in this case, and by the way, FBI counsel Colleen Rowley even testified regarding the criticisms of Robert Mueller, the director, in regards to this particular case involving Zacharias Moussaoui and Hussein Al-Attas. And she basically came under fire. I've interviewed Rowley about this. Go listen to the episode on The Darkened Hour, where I had a phenomenal talk with her, and it lasted over 2 hours, regarding this matter. So, and Harry Salmon, I heard, is writing a book and is trying to get it approved. So I can't wait to read it. But yes, that's what happened. So the government dropped the ball. And then that's just one story. Then you had Khalid al-Mihdhar Nawaf al-Hazmi. Then you had the Yemen. Then you had the Hamburg cell. The foreign intelligence operators involving Saudi Arabia and Israel. The CIA, the NSA. Yeah, there's a lot of ball dropping here. Enough to make there was enough errors here that really is just profound. And yet they were rewarded for it.
Courtesy.
Is there any discussion between the two of you about requiring additional identification for persons crossing the border in either direction?
We haven't discussed particulars today about ways in which we would enhance security mutually. I think it's fair to say that at least I have expressed to my counterpart, with whom I enjoy working and for whom I have the greatest respect, that we can work together, and that by working together, I think we can enhance the environment and the security of both the United States and Canada.
It's been 3 weeks now since the bombing. Can you at least confirm for us that this plan was hatched overseas?
Well, we believe there is evidence that makes it clear that the roots of this activity were in Afghanistan. And we believe that the branches of the activity not only found their way to the United States of America, but were present in substantial ways in Europe. And that the activities of the conspirators carried them to destinations virtually around the globe. And the the Al-Qaeda organization and terrorist organizations that are cooperative and collaborate with Al-Qaeda are involved in activities around the globe. That's a statement we feel confident in making and that I personally believe reflects the truth.
And the money leads you back.
And it was, because what happened was they got this information from who? The CIA and the NSA, who were monitoring who? The Yemen hub in Sana'a, Yemen. Where did the Hamburg cell come from? Well, they came from Germany. Well, who was in Germany? The CIA, the German BFV, Israeli intelligence, who and God knows who else, right? And where did they come from? Right? Go even before that. Well, I don't know. We haven't gotten much in the way of foreign intelligence, and we probably never will, because nobody's going to be willing to share that about how far back this goes. But the CIA had an open file on Omar al-Bayoumi back in 1996, 5 years prior to 9/11 attacks. Why? It's a Saudi intelligence operator who facilitated the arrival of Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf Bahatmi, the first two 9/11 hijackers inside the United States. Saudi spy. So you wonder how long this goes back. I don't know how long, but at least 10 years prior.
Back to Afghanistan?
We believe that the roots of this act of terrorism, this act of war, are to be found in Afghanistan.
Mr. Ashcroft?
Sir.
You said in your testimony before Congress last week that there were several instances where Canada was used as a transfer point by terrorists into the United States. We know about Ahmed Rassan. Who are the others?
It may be
Ali
that
Muhammad.
I could go back into the materials and identify. I think I would stand with my statement that there were several. I don't have the names memorized for which. You know, the point is that there may have been some who came through Canada. There are many who were here in the United States of America. And
Right.
The fact that they got here and were able to do the things that they did here points out our need for additional tools to fight terrorism and our ability to surveil those terrorists and agents of foreign powers that need surveillance in order for us to protect properly the people of this country.
Now I noticed, all right, and that's the end of the briefing really. And I noticed that, you know, he's not talking about the Visa Express program, which was authorized by the Saudi Arabian government and the United States government regarding the fast tracking and bypassing of secondary hearings regarding visa applicants between citizens of Saudi Arabia into the United States. And basically, you know, when you have terrorists coming out of Afghanistan and Pakistan traveling to Saudi Arabia and then getting false IDs about them being residing in Saudi Arabia, they're being fast tracked inside the United States without having to basically go to a U.S. embassy in Riyadh or Jeddah, you know, the U.S. consuls in Saudi Arabia, and having a face-to-face meeting or a secondary hearing regarding, you know, who they're seeing, how much money they have, how long you're going to stay. You know, they just basically filled out some of these applications. Some of them were incomplete, and they were fast-tracked inside the United States. Then this was all to better relations with Saudi Arabia. By the way, we're still protecting Saudi Arabia from a civil suit case regarding 9/11 families, and you know, the beat goes on. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in to this video, and I'll see you over the weekend. Everybody take care.